Hello everybody, welcome to my cabin and indeed welcome to my new shelves. Now what I thought to do today to christen them is to do a shoe off with 6 of them. So I think I'm going to do a mile on the treadmill or 1600 metres, 4 laps of the Watopia track in each of these 6 shoes and see how they compare. So I think I'll do about 15 kph, which is about sort of 6:30ish pace, probably about my half marathon pace when I'm fit. In this one I think I'll take some of my favourite shoes with the Atreyu one here. It's a bit of a left field one. I just got that in the other day. I had a bit of a disappointing first run in it. It felt like a plimsoll. So I'm kind of hoping it's going to be a bit better on the treadmill. But otherwise I've got a lot of my sort of favourite shoes here. So I'm going to start with the Endorphin Speeds. I'm going to move on to the Pegasus Turbo 2s, then do the Atreyus, and then I'm going to go into the carbon racers. I'll start with the Alphafly, so it'll be night and day between the sort of very minimalist stack height in this one. Hardly felt there was any cushion in this one at all. Whereas if you go to this one, you go from one extreme to the other, that would be the most cushioned shoe of these lot. And then I go into the Adios Pro, and then the Nike NEXT. So the 3 top carbon racers up against my 2 favourite sort of tempo shoes and this left field one here. Right, let's get on with it then. Okay, session done. That was quite tough, although I have to say the first 3 were tougher than the second 3.
Hello everybody, apologies I didn't manage to get any footage of me running, so it's never that interesting anyway, is it? So go straight into the key point of the spreadsheet. Let's just remind us what I did. So it was 4 laps of the Watopia track using Zwift on the treadmill, so obviously that's 1600 metres, and I tried to make sure that I started each run sort of with a little run in so that all the metrics like the stride and the heart rate were already sort of fully working, a bit like a sort of a flying start, shall we say. So I started off in the Saucony Endorphin Speeds, and then I moved into a pair of the Turbo 2s. Then I went into the Atreyu Standard Edition ones, which are up there, which we'll talk about in a minute. Then into the 3 arguably top carbon-plated racing shoes of the moment, the Nike Alphafly, the Adidas Adizero Adios Pro, and the Nike NEXT. So, how did I get on? Well, I mean, I think the headline thing here is to say that things were a lot easier in the carbon fibre plated shoes, even though I did those towards the end, than they were in the tempo shoes in the Atreyu. So, obviously the first one is a bit clouded because you're fresh. So, in the Endorphin Speeds, I managed to do the 4 laps with a heart rate of 141, and then the cadence was 178. With a max of 148. So it was sort of a run where it was around about threshold, just creeping through it. I'd say my threshold is sort of in the mid 140s at the moment as against a max of 164. So when I'm getting up to 148, I'll probably push past through threshold. And when I'm in, let's say, a 141 average, if I could have kept that up, then I probably haven't. So I think you need to sort of take that with a pinch of salt. That you can't say that because when I went to the Turbo 2s, I was 3 beats higher. That was actually harder because obviously that was my second run. But as you can see, I was actually 3 beats higher there on average in the Turbo 2s. But it felt like those were pretty comparable runs. And as you can see there, the cadence was the same. And the other 2 metrics were pretty much the same as well. Now, when I went to the Atreyu Standard shoes, so these are the Atreyu Standard Edition, the Battle Lies Within, and I think they're all basically the same model, but they call their different colorways a different type of headline thing. My first run in these the other day was a 6-mile kind of easy run from my door, because obviously we need to be running from our door at the moment in lockdown in the UK. So it was a fairly easy pace. I was trying to average around about an 8-minute mile pace, but these felt like I was wearing a plimsoll from my school games lessons of the 70s. There was just no cushioning at all. I mean, it felt a bit like a racer in a way. I mean, these are ridiculously light, and that's what the one positive thing about them. They're 210 grams in my size, which is a UK 13. And you might think, well, that's still quite heavy. But when you compare that to, say, the NEXT at 250, those Endorphin Speeds Turbo 2s, they're about 280, and the Alphafly is about 300. So these are substantially lighter. And I think the only road shoe that I've got that is actually lighter than this is the Nike Streak LT4. There's actually no structure at all in the heel cup. The whole sort of feel of it feels very, very minimalist. There's very little material here, so it is a totally stripped down shoe. But as a result, I think they've got a sort of a boring EVA type foam there on that pink bit. It's a 6mm drop, so it's another thing that I don't really like. So I think that's another struggle, having a low drop shoe when you're going slowly. I always find that makes it harder work. It just feels like you fall more to the ground. But generally, I think having been used to sort of the advanced foams, like in the Endorphin Speed or these sort of P-backs type ones, it just feels like you're sort of going back into a time warp with these things. So in a way, you kind of feel that you pay a certain amount of money and that's what you get. So it's a nice looking shoe, I'd say, but compared to a modern day shoe offered by all the major companies, this just seems like just so behind the times. It's incredible. But on the other hand, if you lived in the States, you can get this for about $55. I think I paid, by the time I had shipping, around $80. So then it doesn't really make it quite so attractive then. And then when you're actually running it, you think, well, okay, I don't think you're really missing a great deal if you get these. I mean, maybe if you're an ultra minimalist person, then these will be for you. But these days at age 54, I think I prefer a bit more sponge under my feet. Anyway, so if you go back to the actual running the Atreus, now because there was such a low stack height in them, then it felt like it was just slap, slap, slap. And if I thought the tempo next percents were loud, this was just for like, it was like really loud on the treadmill, because every step felt like really quite loud. Now, what was also interesting, I obviously managed to last the pace, but the heart rate in the Atreyu standards was easily the highest of all the runs by quite a long way, wasn't it? And also interestingly, that it was the highest cadence. Perhaps that reflects the fact that there's very, very little bounce off the treadmill in such a low firm shoe. So all in all, yeah, you can run in it, but in performance terms, this is, I would have to say, this is just terrible. I mean, 153, that's sort of pushing way into sort of race effort, and I'm not sure I could have lasted too much longer in that shoe doing that pace. So, but it was interesting to try it out. And then indeed, when I went to the Alphafly, although that was my fourth run, it instantly just felt so much easier. And the heart rate dropped there 4 beats straight away, both on average and max. I think you have to slightly look at the next two stats in comparison to the Alphafly, because obviously my heart rate got quite high. So there's an element in the next rep that I was trying to actually get the heart rate down again. So the fact that the Adios Pro and then the next percents were then easier still doesn't necessarily mean they were easier than the Alphafly. It just means that I think I was on a downward spiral to get my heart rate down. But what you can see there is very interesting. In the Adios Pro and the next percent, even though these are the 5th and 6th reps, and this wasn't exactly an easy pace for me at all. I mean, these heart rates for me here are pretty high. I mean, as I said, that's pushing through threshold. So it wasn't exactly I'm just going for a jog here. But as you can see, the heart rates in Adios Pro and the next percents were exactly the same as they were when I was fresh in the Endorphin Speed. So I think it's pretty clear evidence here that these carbon races make a huge difference. And even though that these shoes like the Endorphin Speed and the Turbo 2s are good training shoes, then they just don't have the race performance that you get in these ones. It's still hard to say which out of the three was the best shoe for me in this. I always think I prefer the next percent. I just prefer the fit, but the Adios Pro again is doing very well here. Interesting, when we look at the powers, that the powers in the carbon races just seem to be a few bits higher. I'm not sure why that is, because obviously I was just running exactly the same thing here. And it was the lowest cadence in the Alphafly. That probably just reflects also the fact that it had the highest VO. I mean, it's got the most sponge, in inverted commas, in the Alphafly. So in a way, it's just sort of proving the feeling you get on foot in these metrics, that when you put the Alphafly on a treadmill, you feel like you are literally just bouncing off it. But interestingly, the next percent wasn't quite so bouncy, and no more bounce in the next percent than there was in the Endorphin Speed or Turbo 2, which is interesting. And pretty similar to the Adios Pro, although I do feel the Adios Pro is a lot firmer relatively to the Nike ones. I still seem to got a bit of a left leaning. That reflects perhaps the fact that my right leg was the one I did the calf tear on, so maybe I'm still favouring the stronger leg, so that's something I need to be aware of. I'm not quite sure why I had such a low LSS in the Adios Pro. That may reflect the fact that that was the firmest of the shoes, well, apart from the Atreyu standard, which I'd say is the firmest, but also the least of it. So, but firm, nothing to it. I mean, it's little more than, to a certain extent, just having a covering for your foot in a way. And the rest was basically 5 minutes between each one. I took a bit less before got into the Turbo 2 because I was a bit more awake. I don't think that really affected any of the stats. So, yeah, so in conclusion, this definitely shows that the carbon races are the best shoes. It definitely shows that you pay for what you get in the Atreyu standard. So, I mean, I think unless you've got a love for very minimalist, ultra-light shoes, then I would say that's probably a waste of money, even though you're not actually spending that much money. But, you know, that's my opinion. Opinions below if you've used them and feel great. I think it might be a shoe that I might fare better in the summer when I can get out on, or as Andy FOD runner calls buffed out trails, I would call them old railway paths, where it's like not tarmac, but it's not road. I just don't think that's a road shoe, basically, for me these days at age 54. I thought my legs were really sore for 2 days after wearing them. Not the sort of thing you really expect to do when you do 6 miles at 8-minute mile pace for a recovery one. Anyway, so I hope you found this interesting, and look forward to seeing the next one then. Okay, bye!